Okay, folks. So about 8 years ago, I underwent a phase of compromised mental health, and during that time, I had I think, a mistaken or overly biased worldview that held, among other things, that if there are people rather than systems that run the world, then those people must be uniquely malicious or psychopathic or something, okay? And surely, when you discover certain phenomena like, what rogue political actors or intelligence agencies or like the Epstein files collaborators have done, you're going to assume that in order to obtain a certain amount of power and influence and status and wealth and whatnot, you may need a so-called dark triad or psychopathic traits or something. That seems more than plausible to me in some contexts. But it also seems likely to me at this point that what so-called elites are driven by is not necessarily sadism or desire to inflict pain, to derive pleasure through inflicting pain on a small or large scale. Instead, I think what super powerful people are driven by is something like the profit motive. If it profits them, especially financially, to hurt certain people who they regard as subhuman, then they will do that, whether they do it openly or in secret. And if it profits them to benefit people and their well-being, and they can make money off of, say, developing and marketing products that happen to improve human subjective well-being and health metrics up to a point, then they will do that. You should presume not that they're all a bunch of psychopaths, but instead that they are centrally concerned with benefiting themselves, first and foremost, and over time. Okay? And what this means is that if you want to sort of engineer a society in which you have strictly, virtuous, selfless, saintly people obtaining positions of power and using them responsibly, then you would have to set up a system in which there are ways in which to locate and, properly identify and vet and test and support people who have been virtuous and excellent in secret. I just watched a YouTube clip between Andrew Bustamante, Patrick Bet-David, and a woman whose name slips my mind. And within this clip, they were discussing, I guess, a point that secrets are required for society. And, if you could hypothetically spend $300 to have like a perfectly functioning truth serum and you could administer it on anyone, would you want that to exist? Would you want to have access to it? Would you want that to be generally accessible in society? It's an interesting question to meditate with. And what I would say is, if somebody deliberately seeks power, influence, status, money, resources, things that people compete kind of with a sickening degree of intensity for, then I think we should incite them to, take a truth serum that hypothetically works 100% of the time. They should also be incited to taking certain kinds of cognitive tests, health tests, background checks, knowledge tests regarding like what comprises the duties and virtues of a proper statesman and so on and so forth. But yeah, I just wanted to submit this point out there that I think is not very common amidst people who reason mainly through sort of emotionally charged premises, which is that a lot of so-called elites are not primarily psychopaths. I think they're primarily just driven by self-interest, and a certain degree of self-interest is indistinguishable from psychopathy in practice. It's indistinguishable from extreme malice in practice. So if you take certain kinds of political actors, um, you're taking people who like, they don't wake up and think, man, I just can't wait to be responsible for the sniping and bombing of children. Instead, what they probably wake up doing is thinking about like what's going to line their offshore bank accounts as much as possible, and if that requires, killing a bunch of innocent people and seizing natural resources in a territory that is full of people who don't look like them and don't have their cultural or religious or political values, and that's what they're going to do. So, of course, the opposite of this sort of setup would be a means by which we find a way to skillfully and incrementally impart power to people like Grigori Perelman and other people who are not only exceptionally intellectually capable but exceptionally virtuous when nobody's looking. So once again, I want to boringly reiterate that I think Grigori Perelman is the most important public figure I've ever learned about. And to recall something said by Eliezer Yudkowsky, who I think was one of the initial, maybe first movers in the sort of friendly AI and sort of AI pausing development space. The world is most likely to be saved by somebody who quietly uploads like a paper or two or something on archive.org. That's arxiv.org. It's likely going to be saved by somebody uploading papers to that website rather than, some sort of high status celebrity or something. Yeah, but I just wanted to put this out there for you folks. A sufficient degree of self-interest, a sufficient degree of self-enrichment is indistinguishable from the worst kinds of evil imaginable. And that's why you have to be careful about internalizing value judgments, impressions, and premises from people like Ayn Rand. Okay? I'll have more to say on this later. Thank you for watching and have a good day, and God bless you.